Thank you. You're the star of the show, so I don't know. You might write down names.
Okay, can y'all tell me, Heidi, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. I think I have two Zoom windows open. That's not. Okay, cool. Thanks, Carmen. All right. I'll be back in just a
Hey,
minute.
Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
do we have to have the camera on for this one?
Do you want CE?
I don't necessarily need CE. I just have some classes that might be coming in. I thought it might be better if I didn't have the camera on.
Yeah, so if you don't need CE, then no, you don't have to have the camera on.
All right, let me see what I can do. Thank you.
Confirm my speaking language. That's different. Huh. Okay, I'm going to the restroom and then everybody's visiting and then we'll get started.
Well, now talk a lot, so that's true. You're very confident. Well, it's fine.
Oh, I know, yeah. That's what I was saying that. Yeah. You don't have to. Okay. So. I thought you liked the spotlight. Oh, I love it. Are you ready?
No, we got 4 minutes.
Okay. I'll be back in 4 minutes. 3.5.
Yeah, that's probably what we got. Yeah.
Because I always have
Because it was it was so tight all around, like somebody was sitting on it. I mean, it might be just a little bit lower than what's like
Let me know for the
Like, I need to get private cars and everything, get this categorized, and you know, like I was saying, I started working on some of that. I emailed
first in.
that's my, I was chatting with Sherry. She said, oh my God. She's like, oh, that's my. She was thinking it was her she was. Oh my God. She was, and this is that she used to be, and he'll go back this way. Come on, see. Yeah. Michelle,
All right, guys. You guys wrap up conversations because we're gonna get started.
Talking to you.
good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
Good, good. If we haven't met, my name is Sam Welsh. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the association, and I'll be taking over for Lindsay next year when she steps into her new role. So we're glad to have you here today. Thank you for joining us for the first of the Spring Success Series. A few things coming up. We have trivia night tonight at 9:03, hosted by your professional network task force.
Not young,
Not
professional.
young, your professional networkers. So if you have a free evening and want to join us for a beer and some trivia, come on out to 9:03.
Real estate related?
Real estate
There you
and
go.
area related.
Area.
Yes. So feel free to come out and join us. I hope you have a good class.
If you don't have a team, can you still form a
Yes.
team?
Yes, absolutely. If you don't have a team yet, just come. We'll plug you in somewhere. Teams of 2 to 4. So there's
Norman,
some
you
more
got a
to learn.
team? Oh, you and Jeff. You and
Oh.
Jeff.
Can't make it tonight.
All
Oh.
right, well, have a good class, and if you need anything, let us know.
Well, hey, but before you leave, we got to say thank you because you guys remember, well, or if you don't know, the spring series is part of spring. It's exactly right. How'd you know?
It will blossom every spring.
It's part of, it came from the education committee several years ago. In attendance in this series, if you attend all classes in this entire series, so it's a 6-week series, 12 class commitment, because it's 2 classes per week, then if you've not already received free MLS dues for attending the series, you will by attending all of the series. And attendance does not mean that you have to pay for the CE. If you don't need the CE and you attend all of them, then the education committee has agreed to give you a free quarter of MLS dues.
Yes.
Feels like a tongue
And
twister.
how much is that word?
$152.45.
Tax included, right out price.
That's right. But the education committee has done a fabulous job of just making sure that you guys have options available. We're working to make sure that Lamar, Cook, Fannin, and Grayson has access to good education in person as well as on Zoom. So thank y'all for y'all's commitment on that.
Well, thank you guys, and hopefully we're giving out some free MLS.
That's right. As we empower through education. If you're here for CE, Sherry is going to print out that roster so that we can get those signed, and we will also have the surveys. I do have to keep those surveys on file. I always ask for honesty because I can't get better as an instructor if I don't have honest feedback. The For those of you guys on Zoom, make sure that BJ knows in the chat that you are here for CE and you do have to have your camera on. So Heidi is the only camera I see on right now. So my assumption is the rest of you guys are just here because the education's good and you just love it. What are the other classes? Such a great question. And I have the answer. Hang on. So what we're doing different this time for the CEs is bringing in Bart with Paragon, actually Bart as an instructor, because yeah, as a Texas Realtor instructor. And that's what I was going to also share with you in just a few minutes. But here's what we have. Zoom, I'm not sharing with you guys. I don't know if you can see from the TV behind us, but let me just share screen so y'all can see it as well. So here's the lineup of classes that we have this year, the spring. So today we're going to cover appraisal basics and then understanding the title commitment. I love understanding the title commitment because every time you guys learn something new about the title commitment, how many of you guys feel like you're an expert at reading it? Yeah. Sean said he's not. And I think every single year there's something new that pops up on those title commitments that you're like, well, what is that? Why are those popping up now? 2 years ago, it was the solar panel liens that weren't showing up on credit reports, but they would show up on a title commitment. So there's always something new and different that we're learning each year. So we like to bring that back whenever we do these series at least once a year. And then the appraisal basics. It's one of y'all's favorite classes because you get to actually ask questions to the appraiser. Sean's not our appraiser, though he's also here for answering questions too on how what we do on the real estate side is different on the tax side, because that affects real estate in our transactions as well. So thank you for being here, and we might ask your thoughts and opinions on some things. Sean is the chief appraiser at our appraisal district in town, so it's nice to have him in the room. Yeah, not that Sean. We got two Sean experts in the room. And then for the CE portion of it, I'm going to go through the CE part of it, but I want to leave a lot of room for Q&A, and I want to talk about how what's going on and the changes that are taking place, how that affects our jobs moving forward as well. Next week we have a contract. Now comes the hard part. So really understanding the contracts and the transactions. And then I will come back the following week on April 10th, and we're going to talk about put it in reverse mortgages. Reverse mortgages for purchases and for refinances. And I will likely try to get one of our reverse experts in the room. So if you guys ask some really complicated questions, that you've got the answers before you leave, instead of me saying, hey, that's a great question, I'll get you answers later. And then hammer and nails. There's so many different ways to finance a construction project. We even have development money available. So we'll talk about renovation, development, custom homes, spec homes, volume builders versus custom builders, and all of that good stuff on that in that CE. And then Bart will come back on April 17th, and he's going to talk about keeping your advertising legal and ethical. That will be interesting too, because again, with all of the changes going on, transparency is really important in all that we say and do. Then I will, in April, we'll talk about how to turn your passion into profits. Hey guys, speaking of experts. And video marketing. And then Bart will round us out with getting out of the TREC contracts. So I think that is well-rounded series of classes, a little bit of something for everybody. I do see the chat, and I'll get to it in just a second. I also wanted to, so hey, Chris, are you coming up here, or is Josh? Who's with me today?
You get both of us. Wow, I mean, come on.
Well, y'all are too far away then.
All right. Well,
so in the room with me today, Ashley, stand up. Perfect timing. So in the room today, I'm gonna turn the camera around for Zoom to see. Look, this is an underwriter,
A real life one.
a real live and in-person underwriter.
Exist, you're unicorns.
I know you guys don't think that they really exist, and we really just blame it on the underwriter, so you don't blame us.
You take it.
Yeah. But Ashley is here from Arlington today. Yeah. Yes. So Ashley is a guild underwriter. She's our favorite, and I'm so glad that she was close enough to come by. I got to tell y'all though, those who know me won't be surprised. But when I originally, you can sit if you want. I mean, yeah, you can sit. I'm still going to tell a story though. So when I asked Ashley to come and Chris and Josh to come, knowing that they had a drive, I thought, well, yeah, you guys come at 10. We just won't do y'all's part until 10. And then I messed up, and then I promoted to you guys that we were doing this at 9. So then I had to go back to them and change the time. So they got up extra early or started their drive extra early. So thank y'all for doing that.
For sure.
All right. And then we have Lacey. Lacey, you can stand up. We matched today accidentally. Lacey Tucker has joined the Castle team. You guys will be seeing her a lot as I am out and about and chasing some of my passions and some of my dreams, which is my women's empowerment retreats have become something I just truly, truly love. And I'm given more and more opportunities to do them. Next year, I'll probably be really busy traveling in the United States doing those events. So Lacey is here to help me take great care of you guys. So you'll see her often on pre-approvals. You'll see her often out and about the community and helping me do all of the things that we all love to do. So I just wanted to make sure you guys knew to introduce yourself, get to know Lacey, and you'll see her around. And then she's sponsored the event tonight. So trivia night is going to be a fun night and something that she's excited about.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, we are 10 minutes into a CE, so I'm going to get started on the CE part. Get back to sharing screen so those of you guys virtually can see what we're doing. Anybody have any questions before we get started? Does anybody have any expectations for today? More clarity? Me too. So I wanted to introduce to you guys, look at the new branding. It's cool, isn't it? So I am not in the role as a loan officer right now. I'm a Texas real estate instructor. And so in order to define and make sure that there's that clear line between instructor, loan officer, I created some branding around this, and I am RISE. RISE is all of my education and empowerment projects. Inspire strategic education. And I really mean that. What I provide is based on what you tell me you need in order to feel supported in the business. So as our industry changes, I'm trying my best to stay on top of everything that's going on and make sure that we're providing you what you need. So if there's something that you see that you would like more research done on, or some education provided to you, please let me know. I also know that there's some really cool designations out there. And so providing some support to what you're working on is the strategic part of this. I want you guys to feel open and free to share what it is that you need from us, and we'll do our very best to provide it. If I don't feel like I'm an expert in that field, as an instructor, I can bring in experts to help fill the gaps, which is why Chris and Josh are here from Whispering Pines. And then we have Ashley here from the underwriting team, and we have Sean from Red River Title, because I'm not expert in that area. I just know how to facilitate a transaction. And I love to educate. Oh, I love this question. If I could be a superhero, what would I be? Hmm. Hmm? Yeah, what would I be? If I were to be a superhero, what would it be?
You're already Wonder Woman in most of our eyes.
That's who I was thinking of. I
Yeah.
want to go like this and turn into something that looks like she looked in Litards.
Looking good for her age.
I'm dizzy for that.
I like this glass.
Yeah, but that didn't happen.
Wait till you see Sean's next outfit change. Wow.
He's the Hulk. He's the Hulk. All right, so there's a couple of slides that I wanted to cover and I wanted to have a conversation about. What is the difference in a marketing analysis, a CMA, a broker opinion, and an appraisal? And then, since we got Sean in the room, we'll even cover the difference of the tax appraisal, right? So our consumers are so confused about what the three are. So having that clear definition is really important. So the CMA is just, to me, what do you think? I mean, whenever you think CMA versus an appraisal, what do you think the differences are in what you provide and what the appraiser provides?
One's a price, one's a value, isn't it? Technically.
Well,
Yeah,
Because we can't assign
value.
that is no longer part of our vernacular.
Yeah.
As licensees and no hold an appraiser license. We are allowed to provide a
Value.
value. We're supposed to estimate or anticipate an estimated selling price or selling price range. And both of the former two, your CMA and your broker price committee, both require mandatory language that states that we're not appraisers, we did not follow USPAT rules, and it is not considered value in that regard.
So,
You did.
yeah, Norman did a great job. Come on up here as well, Chris.
Pretty soon I'm gonna be.
We have people on Zoom, so speak up.
Yeah, one you can loan against and one you cannot.
Oh, biggest difference. One you can loan against and one you cannot. So, and I was even thinking about, well, your broker opinion. So what's the difference in a CMA and a broker opinion? And if you're going to respond, Norman, come up. Yeah, come up here. Gosh, Norman.
No,
Hold his. Norman's going to give the answers, but he won't state them online. Broker opinion. So if a CMA is really done as giving a range of what a home could possibly sell for, a listing price, right? A marketing price, thus the word marketing, right? Then what is the difference in a CMA and a broker opinion?
Good question.
I thought so too.
There are specific guidelines for broker price opinion. The Trek outlines for us.
Might be the best post-game interview of all time.
Wonderful mindset when you stepped in the batter's box.
That broker price opinion, when you did or did not do a fiscal inspection, what dates those happened. I'm trying to remember some of the other criteria, but it's very specific about who you're providing the report for. What's the purpose of the report? Like I said, there are guidelines out there for that from Trek to us as licensees. All
the buttons that you got to push in for the disclosures. So I see in this was stated in the slide on purpose. It's typically banks use BPOs quite often, right? Especially if the lending was done within that bank loan officer's lending authority, then they'll accept a BPO. They don't ask for CMAs, they'll accept a BPO. So now, Sean, what is different between what you guys do as appraisers and the values that you state? Is the difference really the fact that you don't know anything about the inside of the house? whenever you're doing assessing a value? What would you say is the biggest difference?
It definitely makes a difference, but, so we follow use path standards, same as. Five, six, or nine. Typical pattern, universe, snow in the area, and we'll apply it to the. Nice, we can get it, I always do Pebblebrook.
Yeah, Pebblebrook is a great example. Yeah.
Same quality, same structure, they're all built around the same time. Find a couple cells in that area, 4, 5, 6 cells in that area. Go with the home. And we still have all the same characteristics.
So you're looking at market trends in a similar neighborhood, if possible.
Right. Yeah, all the work, what they, what the specifics,
Oh, gosh.
I'll mute yourself.
quality, size of the land.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was like thinking while listening.
Ratios,
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Bye. All right. Bye.
Y'all know that.
That make a big, yeah.
Like, oh, Hamilton. Well, these are all the same quality. Oh, y'all know they were built by different builders and quality. Literally got $200,000.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest difference is the inability to see the insides. Yeah. But y'all heard that they still follow USPAP guidelines whenever they're establishing the values. Yes.
We do, or just listings out there. If we can identify the homes, probably, down the
Okay.
sell it.
Because it's in the MLS.
Effective age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have access to other public records, permits.
The permits that are recorded.
The city, if they're inside of the incorporated city limits, require you to qualify for whatever it could be. Remodel, public records.
So years ago, we used to there was a big difference in what the tax rolls were showing us in the value and what the home really sold for or appraised for. We really find that really lined up, even on before the transaction has been consummated and anything recorded. So it has caught up in the last couple of years for sure. So, all right. So I just wanted to make sure that we were really clear so that you could even articulate to people what the difference is between a CMA and a BPO and a true appraisal. Because oftentimes, you guys are running CMAs all the time before you make an offer on a home. And when you're listing the property, you're doing your best at identifying a range, not knowing what the actual value is going to come back from an appraiser. And honestly, you could get 3 appraisers on one property and sometimes get 3 different appraisals. And the appraisal adjustments and all of that are going to look different. So that leads me into, we've got Chris here, and he's going to share his thoughts and opinions. Josh may go over here, go, wait, if I were looking at that, I'd look at it a little bit different. And there's another class that we've done in the past, and I'd love to do it this fall, where we go a little bit deeper about comps, adjustments, and unusual properties and the things that really throw you guys off, and address all of those questions, because that has so much value too, and understanding how the appraiser is thinking. All right. So, Chris, come on up here, because I'm going to ask you some questions as we go through the rest of these slides. And then I want to, this is open dialogue for everybody. So his job, he's our eyeballs as a lender. We order an appraisal, it goes through a third-party company, they assign the appraisal to an appraiser. And his job is to be our eyes and ears. Ashley is going to be looking at his report, but she still has to analyze all of the data and the information on the report, and she could question any of the information. So he's got to do all of his research to defend everything he puts in that report, not just with the with the underwriter, but with an auditor later. And what's the percentage of your files, appraisers, reports that get audited?
Joshua, do you know that? By GSC, by our internal, what were you talking?
By when you all have y'all's peer audits.
Okay, so those, well, that depends. Okay, so we have a QC process that goes into place. I don't want to get too granular here. I can say at least 20% of all files.
That's what I thought. About 20% of the appraisal reports that an appraiser turns in is audited by their peers.
Can you put that into context, Joshua? How many per week? Like, how many are we doing right now? So our firm, we're about 30 to 200 appraisals.
You're going to have to come up here, Josh.
Yeah, you might as well get
Joshua, get on up here.
Actually, I didn't know. I didn't know we're working today.
You are.
He even said that. He goes, I love this. Yeah, I found out.
That's why I like inviting y'all, because y'all just go with the flow with me.
For sure. So we're with Bushman Pond Appraisers. We do, we're about a staff of 30. We're in North and Central Texas. Our headquarters is in Frisco, and we have an office in Austin. We process a few hundred appraisals per week. So that'd be 40 then. If we're running about 20%, so about 40 actually get internally audited. And there's some different triggers that we do. We also, we have a staff, QC staff, a QC staff that just scrubs them. Like, we're trying to find things wrong. It kind of works like that.
And then guess what? Then 100% of the files turned in, we audit before it even comes to Ashley, who's going to audit the file. And then we get audited. The underwriter gets audited.
Is this auditing thing pay pretty well? I mean, we sign up for
I think you would be a great auditor, Norman.
Honestly, the reason, so in that first, in the first statement there, defensible, everything we do has to be data-driven. It's one of our core values, data-driven decisions. So I mean, we laugh, like we'll come in, they're like, hey, remember that sheet that was going around and you had garage stall adjustment, 2,000 per stall. Like, we don't work like that. That's not supported. If we ever get taken to the mat, I never want to have my license or any of my peers' licenses held hostage because somebody did an adjustment like that. If the market warrants an adjustment like that, that's one thing, but data-driven decisions, it's one of our core values. I would also say too, like, when we talk about like auditing, like, this is not a very sexy thing. It's not something I get really excited about. What does get me excited is knowing that we're eliminating any path or any point of like slowing up this process. So if there's something we could have put in the report that helps someone like Ashley, like, since she's not there, physically see and better understand, oh, this is the narrative. That makes sense. They did it because we did a match pairs analysis, and that's what the market, if we can go like and get ahead of it, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, like preemptive, it makes her job easier, makes our job easier, because we're not getting revision requests. And guess what? You can get the loan to the finish line sooner. So that's why I would just say it's really key. Gil does a great job of this. They manage their panel that they have to stay compliant, but know the appraisers that you're working with, because not all of them run like that.
So on top of all of that, and I'm driving this home for you guys because sometimes you get frustrated over the results of their work, but understand that they've done the research, they've done the work, and they feel like what they have put in writing is valid. But even after all that, there is a computer model that all appraisals on a conventional loan, well, Fannie Mae, runs through. Collateral underwrite. And we did a whole entire class on that. And it will blow your mind. But these appraisals are graded by a computer, and it's all about algorithms. And if it spits out results that are not satisfactory, then, oh my goodness, because those appraisals are data driven, you can't change the data.
Yep.
And so the results are what they are. And so,
Well, Michelle, if I may, on that,
yes,
I think
please.
one of the super important things about, working with a local lender like a guild or someone, when it comes to the CU score, okay? Whenever we upload, appraisers don't have access to the CU score. We don't even get to know what we're batting. Like, we don't know what it
So we're
grades us
held
on.
accountable to it, and we have no idea what.
We don't
that
know
number is.
the math
It's
involved.
Kind of a weird.
We don't know how to.
Ashley, do you know the math involved?
It's
Yeah.
highly guarded secret by Fannie Mae. My friend Scott over there helped create that information, and even that guy will not tell me anything.
And we've tried.
So yeah, I have tried. I'm trying to crack the code. So it assigns a score from 1 through 5, 5 being the most highest risk tolerance. Okay, and clearly lenders are risk averse, and so is Fannie Mae. So oftentimes, what maybe realtors aren't aware of is that it's not only about getting this deal across the finish line, but it's also making sure that this deal doesn't get a repurchase request from Fannie Mae saying, hey, this is a deficient loan and we are not going to take this because of this and this and this within the appraisal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not the appraisal. Sometimes it's just a risky deal. However, often it's usually the appraisal. And so having underwriters that are local to the market that understand the nuances of different neighborhoods, okay, to understanding, that lending in Dallas is different than Sherman, okay? East Sherman, West Sherman. There are nuances.
Trenton, Ivanhoe.
Right? There are nuances. Because when you're working with a big box retailer, their underwriters might be on the East or West Coast. I'm seeing a growing trend of actually even outside the U.S. underwriters as well. And so these people do not understand those nuances. And so what ends up happening is it clogs up the process, delays the timeline, because you're constantly going back and forth trying to explain, the nuances of that report.
Has anybody had a last minute, oh my gosh, the appraisal made value just fine, and then you find out from the underwriter, but it is a CU, what is it? It's got to be 4 or 5, right?
It's 2.5. 2.5 and higher now is usually cause for most lenders.
So you all of a sudden have a last minute problem with the appraisal, and you thought it made value, there's no required repairs. What could it possibly be? It's the risk that was determined by the CU. And that's not something that we don't, that it does not, the appraisal doesn't get run through CU until it gets to underwriting. And that's at the very end.
So it's looking for overinflation or underinflation.
A really unique property too.
Mm-hmm.
Like
big adjustments because maybe it's a house on a lot of acreage, and maybe you have a large shop that's got living quarters in it, and there's just a lot of adjustments and there's not comps for it because maybe it is rural and the comps are so far out that it could just be that. Not anything wrong with the property, not anything wrong with the appraisal. The appraiser did the best they could with what was available. It's just for pipelines, 3 pipelines going through it, and so that, yeah.
And how do you make something like that work, or is it just not gonna happen?
If we get that file and we have, if Ashley calls, and that's one thing that's good is our underwriters don't just, hey, you got a bad appraisal, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, hit that button and leave for the day. They'll give us a call and we'll work through it. We would look at flipping at Freddie Mac. If we could go Freddie Mac instead of Fannie Mae, we would look at, we'll just look at restructuring the loan.
Sometimes you guys, though, will order another appraisal.
Yeah, sometimes.
Now, you can't charge a borrower for that, so the lender hates ordering a second appraisal because that's coming out of their pocket. They have to eat that.
And it's part of that property's pedigree too. I mean, you can see when we order, we can't just go, hey, I don't like that appraisal, I'm gonna get another one. That totally changed after 2008.
No, absolutely. Just generally speaking, when there's a high CU score, it gets assigned to an appraisal. Okay, and the appraiser and the underwriter have already gone back and forth, and they've already done the sparring, lender's like, I don't know about this, then maybe they'll order a field review. Okay, where now you get another appraiser to go out. And what's crazy is depending upon the complexity of what this property is, this appraiser may come in with something completely different, which then can undermine the integrity of the original appraiser. Which is like, why does this person have a different perspective on this property than this other person? And that's one of the difficulties of appraising, is that it's an opinion. And just like your armpit, everyone has one, right? So
Oh, that's new.
Yeah.
So.
We haven't used that
Well done. So you guys feel that pain.
That's one for Josh.
When we have an appraisal come back that's so different from our CMA, like, you guys feel that pain too?
oh, absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Here's the thing, it's all about how you approach it.
It's so subjective.
It
Yes, it
really
is.
is. I will say, and I've always said this, a house is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. Go for it. You should buy that house. Now, when you start using other people's money for it, now there's some things. So when we make adjustments and when we come to an opinion of value, at least with our team, it better be credible and defendable. Actually, less adjustments are better in our thing because what that's telling us is like, if I have a $500,000 property, and I trust me, we get a lot of review work from other appraisers through other lenders. If you have a $500,000 property and all of the comps are $200,000 unadjusted, guess what? You're going to have some wild adjustments. It might be an indicator that you've picked the wrong comps.
so much.
So,
That's all you had.
but here's the thing: if that's all you have, make sure you've exhausted. And this is something Guild and us were really similar at, like when Miss Michelle's talking about like, what are our options? What can we do? Anytime, like with our team, like we'll exhaust all resources. Hey, like maybe I'm missing something. Let's get one of our other appraisers up here. Anytime, and we've set up protocol too, where it's, you can't say missed value, like you just can't say that. You can say a discrepancy between contract price and appraised value. That's kosher. Anytime that happens, especially in our MLS, it's one of the largest guys, like in the country. So if you have, for example, like someone that's willing, the house is $300,000. You have somebody that's willing to pay that. You've got 4 backup offers that state somebody's willing to pay it, and it's been broadcast out there. And I'm not saying Uncle Timmy giving me such a great deal on this property. Those are always bad deals. It's been marketed. Thousands of people have seen it. This is what the market's saying it's worth. We will exhaust all resources to find, hey, prove me wrong. I hope we find something wrong. But it's just a different way of going about it.
And that's where the narrative matters.
Exactly.
The narrative matters, but the computer doesn't read the narrative.
Yeah.
And so that's where we run into challenges. Ashley's going to read that narrative because she wants to know why those adjustments were made, and she's going to go to the narrative. So an appraisal is only really as good as a narrative because you have to be able to explain. And so but the computer doesn't see that. So that's where you could get into a situation where it's scored really low, but it still makes sense. And we're okay with the risk. But you guys remember, not only do we as the lender have to be okay with the risk, but if they're getting mortgage insurance on this loan because they're only putting 5% down, guess who else has a say-so? It's not just us. So Ashley's looking at it to make our underwriters will do a good job of mitigating risk, but also make sure that we are preempting any other challenges that we might have further down the line, including getting mortgage insurance.
Their value. Everyone's defending.
And it's not just defending to make you feel like you're doing a good job. It's your license on the line. It's your career.
That's
So,
because I mean, within appraising, you can have conservative appraisers, and then you can have very liberal appraisers. Okay, you have some appraisers who may be liberal and will refuse to talk to you and do not consider revision requests or a reconsideration of value, meaning that if there's a discrepancy in contract, in our opinion. They may say, no, that's my word is God. This is my opinion. There's no other information that you can give to me to influence that. Any secondary information would be creating undue bias, and that goes against USPAC. That might be their perspective.
We've heard it all.
Okay. And where another appraiser might be like, no, we can talk all day long. Like, okay, clearly we're not supposed to talk to the mortgage lender and the production staff during the life cycle of the appraisal. That could get our licenses put at risk.
And mine too.
But we can talk to the appraisal staff if they have them, like Gil does. So awesome. We can speak with them. And if the lender authorizes it, we can even hop on a call with the realtor, with the borrower. We
do that.
We're only allowed by USPAC guidelines to communicate directly with the client. Oftentimes the borrower thinks that they're the client because they're the one paying, but they're not. I mean, they are paying at closing, okay, but in the interim, we're hired by the lender. So we have to communicate with the lender. Oftentimes appraisers, though, and I'm going to give y'all dirt, they will hide behind that, okay, to not have to talk to a realtor, okay? They will say, oh, no, we're not allowed to talk to you guys on this. Sometimes that happens.
And that's why these classes are so important, because you guys need to be educated. Because if you are going to talk to a realtor, to an appraiser, you need to remove the emotions and talk facts, because everything they do is based on facts and data. It's all data driven. So when you understand the appraisal process better, your conversations are better and the outcome is better whenever you do have those conversations. And we'll cover that process in just a few minutes, just so you'll understand if you do have to provide additional information to the appraiser that the appraiser may or may not have been aware of. You'll know how to do that and have those conversations, because those outcomes are oftentimes positive outcomes because of information that just wasn't known. But it does have to, again, be data driven. One question I want to be sure that we get to is how, from a data standpoint, one thing that just came to mind as we're talking about all of this stuff is how much of a lender's life changed after Dodd-Frank in 2008, much like you guys are about to experience. I understand the concerns, I understand the confusion, I understand the emotions right now, because there is that fear of the unknown. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know what it's going to look like, and you're ready to start putting some processes and systems in place to do your job as a professional, but you don't even know how you're going to do that because there's so much unknown. I get it. We went through that when Dodd-Frank came out in 2008. It was really not until 2013 that we had all of the clarity about what that bill meant to us in our industry. So it's going to take a little bit of time. But based on that, what we know right now, what are your thoughts about how commissions and the variety of different ways that commissions could be paid and the amounts that will be paid? Will that affect property values? And if so, how? And what are y'all going to be looking for now? Because is there going to be, do you think the form will be revised? It has the, what is this going to look like?
That is a very complex question, and one that I wish I had a very clear and concise answer for you on. I feel like the last week and a half of my life has been drinking from the fire hose. I'm trying to understand what are the ramifications
water
of this.
or bourbon?
Well, maybe not bourbon these days.
That's a whole
not
other
these
story.
days.
That's a whole other story.
But yeah, just trying to figure out, hey, how's that going to affect? Because the truth is, when things are marketed, when you guys price things, what is built into that? Right?
The cost.
Your money.
Yeah.
Your freaking money's built into that, right? So if that's now off the table here, okay, well, how's that going to affect? Well, that's an interesting question. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more very ingenious negotiation skills that are going to have to come into play, a lot of different types of concessions, and clearly you can't finance your commission. So I don't know how that's all going to play out. I don't know. I don't have a clear answer for you yet. It's more of those, more will be revealed in time. Yeah.
And
Completely agree.
And it could be appraiser's discretion too, right? Until we have more data.
Yeah, so the one thing that so we're talking about commissions versus like concessions. Concessions are interesting because you might have, like on a sales grid, not to get like nerdy, but like if you have your 3 primary comps, they all had 10K in concessions, whatever. You might not even mark that on there. You might put some notation.
Especially on a $250,000 house where it's expected.
Yeah, like that's just kind of par for the course. Now, if you have your primary comp that it's like, oh yeah, this one, like this is the money comp, and so you have 6 comps, and there's only one that had concessions, and this is the money comp, and it had 30K. Okay, now there's something else going on here that like I would not be doing my due diligence if I did not know that. So again, it just depends on what's like accepted by the market and what's not. But as far as this whole commission thing, yeah, we're still trying to figure out.
What's, yeah.
So our commissions, I know that I've seen say we've never adjusted based on commissions, but isn't commission really an unspoken concession?
I mean, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I mean, it's
I understand.
not written that way.
It's not written that way.
Disclosure that way.
We would never look at it that way. I hear your perspective. We would not look at it.
Our appraisers honestly don't even look at it.
We are never taking into account ever.
It is in there. It's in the listing. Here's where I
line item.
You look at
I was
seller concessions.
So I was thinking about this last night. I was like, okay, preparing what kind of questions are we gonna do?
What is Michelle gonna ask?
This is what I do. So great. My kids are screaming. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you're looking young. He's got great skin.
Anyways,
They're trying to leave a nest.
yeah, they're getting out. Commissions, like, where would that matter for me? And I was thinking about, here's where it would matter. If there was something that sold off market and that thing popped for more, like if it popped for more than what they were asking, and there was like something different about all the other homes that had sold, I would go back, I would have to figure out, okay, why is this? Was it like a for sale by owner, but they wanted to get on the MLS, so somebody uploaded it to the MLS? Then I would go back to the commission, and if I saw the commission was 0, it would just help me paint this picture of like, that makes sense. It wasn't priced right. They didn't use like the experts to like, hey, this is how you list your home. This is why you're paying that commission. That's when I would look at it. If I saw something that was not in line with my other, that would really honestly be the only thing.
Because you're still looking at it through the lens of this person's willing to pay X number of dollars.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
or why was it listed for $199 and sold for $260? And it's not, I'm serious, and it's not a foreclosed property. It's not distressed. It's not a estate. It's not, in my mind though, I'm always like, prove it wrong, prove it wrong, prove it wrong, prove it, until you get down to the point where you're like, that's why. Because they knew what they knew better than the expert, and they sold it for what they wanted to sell for. And they're like, look at what I got, like there was no commission.
So if we get to August, everything is can't disclose commissions in the MLS, and we're trying to run comps, we know that comes from the previous month. Those prices included commissions, and so now we're working with comps. There's not a buyer commission factored in that, so.
because you won't know.
Even in your
First off, I
line of
won't
work-
Neither will the appraiser.
Yeah.
Even in your line of work, we make assumptions.
Yeah, well, here's the thing.
You actually,
First off, I won't make the adjustment if I don't have data. So that's that. We're not the only ones out there. So like I can't, like the idea behind an appraisal is like making everything equal, apple to apple to apple. Yeah, there's some variations, but how do I do that? If that is the case and that's not disclosed, and that like now the prices are being manipulated, I just don't see it going on.
Ashley, how from a lender's perspective, I know I'm thinking as a loan originator, I am not sure how I'm going to write pre-approval letters.
Yeah, there's just
Because I don't have anything that tells me how much the buyer is going to need for closing. So how do I verify assets when I don't know how many how much in assets I need to verify.
There's so many unknowns, so, I mean.
At least when it gets to you, you'll at least have something in writing.
Right, that's the good thing, when you do the appraisal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we can only assume what they're gonna have, or what the kids going to be given, or whatever, so. There's a lot of unknowns right now, for sure. We don't even know how to address it from our perspective. It's also fresh. So, it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting because one of the challenges, the two biggest challenges we have right now, well, three. So many people don't have much money in the bank. I mean, Ashley will tell you how many times we're trying to verify assets and they barely have enough to approve the loan. And this is assets without any reserves, like they're just using everything they have to get into the house. And so that part concerns me because if they need additional money, and y'all remember you have a chart, and if you don't have a chart, I can give you a copy of one that tells you what the max concessions are. So if they've maxed out concessions and they still owe a commission, they may or may not have the ability to pay that. And so when we issue pre-approval letters, knowing what you're going to charge in the event the seller is unwilling to pay is really important to us.
But that extra cushion is gonna be a lot that most.
That extra cushion could make,
Can't,
correct.
so does that become a guideline? You have to have this percentage cushion to, I mean.
I don't think it'll be a loan program guideline because there will be, I am certain that you will have a document that you're going to have to sign, just like we have to now provide loan estimates 7 days prior to closing. The CD has to be signed at least 3 days prior to closing. I think that there's going to be those requirements that the buyer knows what they're going to owe. And that was really, I was looking back into, and that's what it was called, buyer to know what they owe. I feel y'all will have a document that states that we're going to be asking for, and your pre-approvals will be based on that. The problem is until then,
Yeah, we have
what
to
is that
have-
going to look like?
Even for a home,
You're going to need that.
Have to have a signed buyer's rep.
But it doesn't have dollar signs on it yet, right?
Well, they already have.
Okay.
They should already, the ones we use already have that.
So it may be that
It has
we
to
just,
support, like, hey, nice to meet you, would you pay me this much?
yes.
Kind of awkward.
Yeah, so we almost need a scripting and a role-playing class because y'all need practice asking for money. Y'all are good at asking at the listing appointment, but now you got to get good at asking at the buyer appointment. So maybe we need to role-play that so you get comfortable with it because it's going to be different.
I mean, does that come with cocktails to kind of?
Probably it needs to. Take a shot, practice script. Take a shot, practice script. By the end of the night, you'll get really good at it. Or we can't understand you. Anyway, yeah. So that's how we're looking at it, right, Ashley? I mean, those are the things that are going to be it will matter to us.
So what if people
And-
don't have any reserve right now, they don't want the baseline cost of it takes care of it.
So if you want to get paid, you need to make sure that they can afford to pay you, not based on your conversation with them, but your conversation with the lender after the lender's looked at all of their documentation. And I think it's even more important to make sure that people can buy before you spend your time,
And
because
maybe all this time we've been putting the cart before the horse. I'm sure I'll spend weeks looking at houses and then find out.
I do think y'all haven't valued your time
That's-
wisely.
Yeah, so that's where it goes.
Yeah.
One way it was always considered.
It was an assumption. Yeah.
Now, having a line item.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Well,
We can still ask, I mean, if we're a listing agent, we can still ask the seller.
that part does not change.
We can
Mhm.
still have it set aside and,
But we can't
figure out how to get it to them, right?
You can put it in the MLS.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
Most fields are
I
being
mean,
so
so it's
wide.
gonna be.
Yeah.
It's an option.
half to 3/4 of the buyers are still going, buyers agents are going to.
I think I agree, but my point is you don't know till you find the house, and you spend a lot of time up to that point. So value your time and know what you're worth and have that conversation early.
And then the buyers may, it may be where the buyers don't want to see houses unless the commission's all every single one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but my point is transparency and communication is more important now than it has ever been since I've been in this business. That relationship that you have and having that conversation is so important because because your career is on, I mean, your bank account's on the line anyway.
It can swing to buyer lawsuits now if we're not very
Absolutely
clear and do everything exactly the same with every client.
Yep. I almost feel like I need E&O insurance now, you know?
You don't have any?
I mean, I have protection, but I almost feel like I need more. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But I just wanted to open that conversation. I think every time we get together, we'll have more and more of that conversation because we'll learn more and more, I hope. If nothing else, we'll be exchanging more and more creative ideas. I don't know, but there's no reason to avoid the conversation because it's transpiring daily. All right, so there are differences. No,
She's
No.
she's got us locked
Talking
in.
about loan
We're locked in. Let's go.
no,
First one up.
Yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to make sure.
Wait, Sean, good job.
What? Okay, so there is differences in what the expectations are on the condition of a property based on the loan program. And once again, while we're talking about what we're talking about, there may be times that you guys have to go FHA because the buyer needs some concessions and help with the commission. So now where maybe they would have gone conventional, they have limited funds out of pocket. So now we're going FHA because of the flexibility, right? I did see you guys celebrate. The conversation has already started with the VA that there's going to have to be some changes put in place for the commission to be paid by the veteran because right now that's a non-allowable. So they're already in discussion over that. So condition of property. Do you can you give just like a broad scope difference between FHA, VA? I know you're not a fee appraiser, but cover that, and conventional FHA, VA. I don't know if I said it that way.
Okay. So conventional, just that. I mean, we go into the property, we look at it. You can have ratings anywhere for our condition ratings like C1 new construction, C2 relatively new, 3 would be updates that would make it, say it's 10, 20 years old, but would be like you're going into a home that's been not only maintained, but updated with the times. You don't have, carpeting, bathroom, that type of thing.
But it's so soft.
But so soft, yes, so soft. Most of the properties that our firm looks at are going to go conventional. FHA, I will say that's going to be when you think, hey, will it have to go FHA? What are some requirements now? We've got more flexibility with conventionals. FHA, now we've got other people involved and there's certain minimum requirements. The FHA handbook that we have is always getting updated each year. Basically, like a rule of thumb though, like I teach our appraisers, is like, man, if you got kiddos, if you have, for example, if you go up on the second floor and your child can put their head or get their body through the space of the spindles, probably not going to go FHA. Like there's just things where like now you can go back to the book and say, yeah, they have to be X amount inches, spaced, all this. But a lot of it's just kind of common sense. Danger, other exposed wires, or things like that. And then always we go back to, hey, what are the guidelines? But that's really a good indicator for our team. And then obviously on the appraisal, we have to call those out. You know, if it's FHA, I mean, there's an additional amount of work that goes into it, and time on site that our appraisers have. It's just like above and beyond.
I think the easiest way on the FHA thing, since we're using, that's a government loan, okay, it's government backed, it's gonna be more stringent lending requirements, okay? Government has tighter requirements, which means that we have to have tighter appraisal processes in place, okay? Doesn't mean that the deal's gonna fall apart, doesn't mean that it's less likely to go apart, it just means that it just has a little bit more complexity than maybe a conventional loan. Now, FHA loan, often it's a more rural area that, you know, we see those loans done, or maybe it's a first-time home buyer, you know. But just because it's an FHA versus a conventional, I know I've heard a lot of realtors be like, no, if I've got, you know, a few offers, I'm going to always go to the conventional. It just seems easier. It's not necessarily true.
Yeah, and we don't care either way. Just so you know, like how our appraisers look at it is like, this is a standard appraisal with, it'd be like having a single family with a rent schedule. It's just an add-on product for us. It's just an extra set of information we have to provide. There's a little bit of verbiage that changes in some of our disclosures, but that's about it.
And then with the VA, if I may.
Yeah.
So essentially, in order to do conventional loans, you have to be at least licensed or be a trainee for 1 year, okay? In order to do FHA loans, you have to be certified, you have to be HUD approved, which is a process. You have to have a minimum of 3 years of experience as an appraiser, which all of our certified appraisers are HUD approved. And then in order to be a VA appraiser, you have to have 5 years of experience and be on the VA roster. And so if you were to think about incremental lending guidelines, VA is not like more complex than, let's say, FHA at all. It's just different because we're for veterans.
There's like more barriers. That's how I'd say barriers to entry on that. It's not like it's more complex. And it's a pain too. If you see like a VA loan, they're like,
No, they're not. They're easy peasy.
no, they're easy peasy. I'm saying
she's the expert. She knows.
Everything's easy to kill. Okay, I'm saying like the appraisers, there's not as many appraisers that do VAs, and that's because they have such a high barrier to entry. And unfortunately, y'all are the ones that suffer on it. It's just harder to get.
Also can't go back to the messages.
No.
Yeah, it's like this weird, it's like it's
protected.
30
They are
to 40
protected.
years like stepping back.
The rebuttal process is different.
I'd like it to change.
Yeah.
Do
Do you think some of that will change with, some of the non-allowables being looked at now? Do you think they'll kind of revamp the whole thing?
No.
Mm-mm.
Unfortunately,
no. The one thing that I just wanted to cover briefly, because we are at the top of the hour, is disputing a low value. We talked about that whole process. If we run it through, it's a Fannie Mae loan, and we run it through collateral underwrite, we end up with an issue. How we handle those, there's really not anything that you can do about that. And typically at that point, the appraisal part of it is fine. I mean, we've worked through that. But whenever it comes to disputing we say low appraisal, it could be anything about that appraisal that you don't agree with.
We often come in at value or contract all the time, and yet they do not agree with the appraisal. They go, why did you use these comparables?
Just when you think like you've had it figured out, like we had like back in the day where it was like, I've had people complain, came in too high. And it's like, and I'm thinking, why would you do that? Because you're trying to weed out your competition, and then you're placing a bet that it won't make value, and you think you can go back and renegotiate it. I have seen it all where you're like, no, it made value. You paid too much.
So if you're not happy with the results of the appraisal, you can go back, you can ask the appraiser, you can ask the lender to complete the paperwork that is necessary and provide additional facts, documents, data to go back to the appraiser and have them do a reconsideration. And that's what it's called, reconsideration.
Can I share something they may or may not want to know? Really
yeah.
So sometimes realtors, you want to listen to this. Sometimes when you have additional comps or something you're going to submit to the lender, to your lender partner, to send to the appraiser, sometimes it never makes it to the appraiser. The lender, Michelle, she's so freaking amazing. She receives it. She sends it to her appraisal partner. Okay, there's like a chain of command or systems that we use, and it's like regulated for compliance. Okay, so that there can be lots of eyes to understand what's going on, so there's no collusion. Well, that goes through a filter essentially. Okay, there's a person monitoring this filter, and that person can deem, because they're part of the appraisal staff, that the information that you provided was not even valid. Okay, and it may never even make it to the person. So it can go into a digital abyss.
Yeah.
That is a nugget that is a secret
That
in
was
the
the
industry.
good-
That
was
I'm
that-
sorry, I
that
just
was the good story.
kicked y'all's puppy. It is what it is. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and for us, our team is a team of appraisers. And I think that adds a lot of value because
No, it
it's
does.
not just someone reading the data and looking up guidelines. It's people that are licensed appraisers that understand and have recently worked in the field. And so they get to have a real nerdy conversation about what you provided and why it
Thanks.
is or is not additional. Well, y'all are data nerds. It's okay. I'm a loner. But my point is remove the emotions, provide facts. And if you don't feel the information is correct, Ashley, do you get offended? I don't either. Just
But-
provide additional information.
But
But
if you want to make the appraiser your sole enemy on the face of the earth, send him 35 comps. Okay.
Anything and everything.
Yeah, no, but seriously, we'll always review the comps. We might miss something. We're humans. We miss things all the time.
I hope, yeah, I joke, but I'm like really serious. I hope we miss something. And I can give specific examples of like where, oh my, like we don't hire other like appraisers. Like we feel like we're doing something different. Like, so we train all of our appraisers that come up, we train them. We train them, we train them, we train them. So like, we're gonna make a mistake. So if we made a mistake and we're like, oh my gosh, yes, we missed this. We're not gonna be offended. I'm gonna be like, thank you so much. What else? You know, like that's just, that's how we work.
Off-market closing disclosure. You have those in an area that I don't know. Awesome. Send them over, please.
I've had, and I've shared this, like I've had one thing we really drill down into our trainees is like, do not miss the house next door. Don't miss the house next door. There is nothing more amateur move than missing the house next door. It's probably 6-7 years ago. I had a yield order. And I know I didn't miss the house next door, but I can't get the information on it. And it was the comp. I know it transferred because we track, you can look at like all the, disclosures. But Texas is non-disclosure state, so I'm like, what the hell did this thing sell for?
call Sean next time. Sean will tell you.
I know what it listed for. I mean, I was like geeking out. I was like, where is this comp? Couldn't get any information. So I actually reached back to Guild and I was like, honestly, like, this is the comp I'm missing. Like that. So I approached them like, I know I'm missing something. I just don't have the data. Guess who did the loan on it? Guild did. They sent me the closing docs and everything. Now I have the price. And I could use it too because it was actively listed. I just didn't know what it sold for. And that was it. So that was kind of like a reverse where I was like, I already knew I missed something, but I just was trying to find that
You
missing
lucked
piece.
out on that one.
I did. It was so good. I love that first. I was like, yeah. So,
What are your thoughts about leaving data for you at the house?
Love it.
That's a great question. I
Please.
want to repeat that just because Heidi said she's not able to hear y'all. Norman asked about leaving data at the house.
Norman, I feel like every time we hear you ask that, and clearly, is it like unnerving? Are people not taking your information? Because we love it. Seriously, like,
Some don't.
okay, well, for a firm like ours, in the approach. Now, there are ways you can meet us on site if you really want to while we do the inspection. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to miss.
I will make.
We're
a
going to be
mistake.
talking. I don't know. Well, we're pretty chatty. And before I know it,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to get off site. I'm going to get about 45 minutes back to the office
I'll forget
and
to
realize
take
I missed the
photos.
half bath.
Yeah.
And now I got to go all
I
the
won't
way
even
back
have a
out.
picture of the front of the house.
Yeah.
I will make that, and then I drive
Sure.
back, and I'm like, oh,
So that's not an excuse to like not meet you there. That's just the reality is if we're super talkative, we might miss things in the house while we're going through it or whatnot. But if you have a current market analysis, what's really awesome is when they're in a nice little sleeve or a nice little folder, they're left out, maybe they're right at the door, where we can see that. Absolutely.
updates. Like
Yeah,
have those
list
all this
of
out, because here's the thing, I know that not only will Ashley be seeing this, some of my peers might be seeing this, and we just said, it's an opinion of value. If we work in ranges and we have comps that support contract price, actively, those marketed, all this, but it's on the high end of the range, you best understand, I'm gonna put in all that information. Now, I've had times where I've asked the homeowner updates and they're like, well, we've done 7 LED bulbs and I write it down because I'm not a jerk. And I'm like, thank you so much. Oh, and he painted everything, including the cabinets. Wonderful.
That's worth $100 in anybody's mind.
I've seen some of this paint. When you have that list for us, that is so helpful.
No, keep talking. I want to write
That's
that down.
so, it's just so helpful because here's what it does. It helps us with our narrative. It helps us back up. Yeah, hey, I'm not gonna say it was on the high end. Well, we always work in ranges. If the range is from 395 adjusted and 400, when we pop it at 400, there's everything to back it up. Now, we also have roof replaced. That's great. I'll still put it in there. Deferred maintenance. If a hailstorm came through, everybody on your street got a roof, but that's great. I'll put it in.
Question, and I hear that asked often. Square footage is off by, there's 200 square feet they didn't count in the appraisal.
We have the vote the same on the even back the same.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, what was the question?
Clearly, we spend a lot of time together.
Yeah, clearly.
Our wives are like,
Yeah.
you guys can wait.
I see you more than I see my wife.
I know, it's bad.
So is there like a percentage? I mean, like 200 square feet on a 2,000 square foot house, is that a big deal? If it's 200 square feet on a 5,000, I mean, like, what are y'all looking at percentage wise where it matters?
You want to take this one?
Man,
Take a swing at
okay,
it.
so there's a couple things. One,
I get excited.
there's
about
measuring the home to the ANSI standard, okay, which is a newer requirement that came out last year. Okay, so appraisers are going to measure to the nearest, what is it, 10th of an inch? I can't remember now. And so also GLA, what qualifies as GLA? That's something to consider, square footage versus GLA, gross living area. Okay. And I'm crashing the plane, Chris.
All right, I'm gonna take over. Okay, so here's what I have seen this before. I've even seen appraisers where they're like, they go to, I'm not saying you should do this, but like you go to like, you can show up at like Grayson, you can show up at I mean, you can show up these places and you can ask for like the property sketch. I have reviewed these appraisals where like someone will have taken that literal sketch and then they drop in the bedrooms. Like you did not measure the home. So when there's a 200 square foot difference, what are they measuring to? A few things we'll look at. If it's like a 400 square foot difference, that's in my mind, I'm like, that's a layup. Someone's including whether the appraiser did or the county did it incorrectly, including like a garage. Is the GLA, we see this a lot of the times when the property is being listed, like, oh, but it's finished area. Heck, that finished area might be better than the primary residence. But if it's on a detached garage upstairs, guess what? That should not be included on the same GLA. So those are some of the things. Measuring ANSI standards, that can be one thing that would create a little bit of the difference. I can tell you, like, when I first started this, it's like tape measure. I mean, I had people show up with like the little wheel, and they're going like this. I've seen appraisers do this, they'll walk it off. Bad, bad. Don't do that. Our appraisers now, like they will use. Eric was showing me the other day.
So we have a few tools. One,
they're awesome.
So we use LiDAR technology, which is like scanning, 3D mapping.
Awesome.
And a combination of lasers. So now we're like Jedis, okay? We're out here beaming pew-pews, coming up with square footages. It's pretty legit.
I literally saw I'm not even joking. So like they'll take their phone. So everything, we're all about smarter, not harder. And it's more accurate too. I put any of these guys and gals, like their sketches up against anybody. Because they're literally walking around the home like this, and it's taking points of data. It's measuring it. I looked at one yesterday, it was like 5,391.2 square feet. And it had a curve in it. Like it looked like I mean, it was just crazy. And it was so accurate. And I looked at Eric, was the one that did. Eric posted, phenomenal. How long did this take you? 11 minutes, maybe 12. This would have taken me an hour and a half. No joke. And mine would have been inaccurate. Like, so GLA, so going back to if there's a 200 square foot difference, how did they measure it? Was it incorrectly? I'll tell you, if it's in the, this is just me being nice guy. If it's in, if the tax records, and that's another question we get, we don't give the GLA back to the tax office. Now, if the tax office incorrectly has you assessed at 400 more, we will let the lender know, hey, you might let this party know that they're being, it appears they're being overtaxed. I might have missed something, but here's the sketch. But the biggest thing would be detached GLA that's being included in the overall GLA, and just measuring standards. 200 on 200,000 square foot, that's a big difference. 200 on 8,000 square foot, not so much.
Last thing I'll say about this is I would not assume, and we'll answer your question, I'm so sorry. Just because the appraiser was on site 15 or 20 minutes does not mean that they did not measure accurately.
Yeah.
A skilled appraiser on a cookie cutter home, on like 3-2, 4-3, they're in and out in 20 minutes. Yeah. If they're super skilled. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of times the bar will be like, that appraiser was only here like 15 minutes and it looked like he didn't have a beard. All of a sudden it's, I don't want to discredit everything.
Older appraisers too, and younger.
We have one question.
One question.
He was walking it off.
I have a question because it's common is how would an appraiser look at garage conversions?
Okay, so the question was, how does an appraiser look at garage conversions? And I have an idea for our next class. I'm gonna do an appraisal class. I'll give you the dates and see if you're available, because I'll change the date otherwise.
For you, we'll be back.
All right, so why you might disagree with the appraiser. And just really talk through all of these scenarios, because, and it'll be a 2-hour CE, because y'all always have the best questions. And I think it helps you guys do a better job at pricing your houses.
That question's really loaded. What type of garage conversion are we talking about? Where's the garage conversion? What neighborhood? How big is it? Like, is it similar, like quality?
Garage conversion, I feel like it's a pretty standard.
Yep.
2-car garage.
You answered it.
Attached 2-car garage.
So you just answered it.
Oh,
Pretty standard in this area.
yeah.
Is it standard in this neighborhood? Is it standard? If you do it in some of the neighborhoods, I can just go off of like some of these master plan communities, like, you
did in my neighborhood.
Your neighborhood? No, it probably, like, you would get negatively dinged on your appraisal based on data. Now something might change and everybody on his street has garage conversions. Great. So is it common in that neighborhood? 2, is the type of construction is the type of construction fit and finish equal to or greater than the primary residence? If we converted the garage,
And heated
that
and cooled.
means, and that means that if we converted the garage, and what that means is you literally put drywall up over the, where the garage should go up, and you put a fan. Probably not the same fit and finish, and nor should an appraiser include that. That's one of the other things too. You have to have those the ability to raise the garage door completely. The garage door has to, like, you can get into the nitty gritty on this. Really, what I say is that when you walk into it, is it accepted by the neighborhood? And when you walk into it, is it equal to or greater to finish your home? Yeah, these guys
we're gonna
definitely
be,
look at that, 'cause that's a big deal for
If
you.
you would call that out separately, that's square footage. And
I would include it actually in the GLA.
At the same rate?
Yes, and that's
If
where
it's
it's like
typical
equal
for the
to or,
neighborhood.
Two or greater than.
I wanted to ask about because when you are pricing in our area and it's going to Sherman, Tennessee now, Shrine, in Austin, there's a lot.
It's common. Yeah. Could be common.
And they have vertically
Yep.
70 homes and the
Yep.
garage.
Yep.
I've seen it.
Mother, father-in-law suite, and now we've got a carport out front. Yeah,
Yep.
it's common.
Thank y'all. I know we're over time for this, but what great information.
It's fun. Thank you guys so much.
Thank
Seriously,
you.
good questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We gotta figure out some other.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do?
I've got this slide up so that you can scan this. So if you haven't registered for the other classes, it's a good time to get your phone out and go to the site and get registered. You leaving that with me?
I am.
The one thing we didn't talk about that I want to mention too is another QC in the whole lending process as it relates to appraisals is every file also gets ran through for fraud. There's a service that we use, it's web-based, and all of you guys, we run your name, your license through it, the loan officer, the appraiser, the buyer, the seller, and it even looks for all of the properties that they've owned that they may or may not have disclosed. It will also look for any sales data as it relates to the appraisal, and Ashley has to review that as well and compare it to the comps used in the appraisal. So it's just, that whole process is so data heavy.
And with the collateral underwriter, just to touch on that, like when we come back to you guys asking, because the different one little change to the report can change the score.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
100%.
that's what's crazy about it. So fitting.
Yeah. And we don't know what would trigger that
We don't know.
necessarily. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
It's this whole history.
Playing a board game, okay, and you literally do not know the rules.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's try to make it to the finish line. Roll the dice, maybe we'll get it this time.
Yeah.
They literally have no idea.
Yeah. So again, I can't stress enough transparency, communication. That is how we succeed in this business. We have to always be communicating. We always have to be, just lay it all out there so that we can have a conversation, so we can best guide and advise and help people get into homes and sellers move out of homes. Thank y'all so much. Y'all really, truly are so phenomenal. I appreciate you greatly. Absolutely. All right, y'all gonna stay around for title? You're welcome to.
Wow, I mean, yeah, we're here. I want to hear all the.
Hey, listen, I love growth-minded people, so that's why I love y'all so much.
Well, there's a lot of things that happen in the tertiary.
Absolutely,
impact, and so
absolutely.
being able to understand.
Yes.
Consultative.
Yes, yes, yes. Sean's got some handouts so that you guys can follow along. Once again, this is something that is often overlooked. The importance of reading and understanding your title commitment is often not something that's focused on and should. I'm going to tell it on you, Norman. So a couple of years ago, Norman and I were in the middle of a transaction, and I don't even remember what the details were, but we got the title commitment back, and Norman called out something on the title commitment, and it just was like bells off in my head, like, why aren't more realtors reading and questioning and noticing these things? Because it is boring. But it was early enough in the transaction that we could do something about it. Had he not, and had, because he read it before we had, I mean, since
I
then,
only had one kid, I got kids.
well, I mean, but it's still, the one thing that came from that is training my staff to be better at reading title commitments. Because before we would just rely on the title company to say, hey, did you notice? And they don't always call that stuff out either. And so you get to the underwriter, and then Ashley's looking at the title commitment, and she's going, hey, y'all didn't say anything. I don't see that this was addressed. And by the time an underwriter is reviewing the title commitment, now we process loans differently in our branch. We do a lot of things differently than different than a lot of companies. Number one, our pre-approvals are super thorough. And if we aren't 100% sure about the income calculations, because the income on a file will make or break the deal. Every deal that doesn't make at other lenders at the last minute, I promise you, 95% of it is because incorrect calculations on the income. And so if we're not 100% sure, Ashley's team will see that file and we will ask them to go ahead and calculate the income for us for the pre-approval, so we know we are good. Then as soon, yeah, we have one right now, and it is just a complicated one. A lot of people have gone through a lot of job changes. Just briefly, I want to explain. If someone has had, and we had this the other day, someone completed the application, they showed they had 2 jobs in the last 2 years. Guess how many they really had? They had 6. All right. Several of them with temp agencies. And her pay wasn't just the standard salary pay. So in order to calculate her income, we have to have not just that she worked at this job in this field, we have to know exactly how she was paid. A past employer is not always motivated to help us out quickly.
But like when you asked your wife how many boyfriends she had before.
Yes, that is exactly. You omit until it's discovered. Yes.
You really want to know? 2 boyfriends, wow.
Yeah, that's whenever you know, but they were just temporary, so I didn't think it really mattered. It didn't count. And so it's really important for us to get all of the data that we need quickly. Transparent communication. It makes or breaks every deal. So we'll do everything that we can to preempt any delays, any struggles that you might have by doing, we will do all of the extra work at our expense, just like you guys show homes at your expense, and you don't get compensated until the deal funds, and you don't always get compensated on every buyer you're working with. Well, guess what? Neither do we. But we do what we do because it just matters. It's integrity. So, but the title commitment often comes later on in the process. So if you have any problems later in the process, it's not because we didn't pay attention. It's not because we didn't want to look at the title commitment. It sometimes takes time, because if you don't know what goes on behind the scenes to put a commitment together, you need to go take a tour and go watch and see. They don't always, just like we don't have all of the data in order to, until we start doing all the verifications, neither do they. Sometimes those title commitments are so ugly. There's holes in the chain of title that have to get resolved before they can even determine what that commitment's going to look like. You need to understand your title commitments. They will make or break your deals too. They'll delay your closings because of things that have to be taken care of. Yeah.
I want to take one quick step back.
You got to get closer.
I will. These guys, I'm glad you guys came. I don't have anything to do with what y'all did, but it was so interesting. So if Norby has been doing this,
Get closer to the camera. The thing.
The Dodd-Frank thing, legislation that she talked about was the legislative cure for the predatory lending from the 2004 to 2007 run of adjustable rate mortgages and things that were considered predatory. So when AmeriQuest closed and Countrywide closed due to these predatory practices, the only people that went to jail were appraisers. So, and these guys know that, right? So if you're wondering why is Fannie such a hard ass on these guys, like that's really why. Like the Countrywide executives got fat and went to another lender, right? But appraisers went to jail, and they were the only ones in the transaction that went to jail. So I appreciated hearing some background on that. And if you're wondering why they are hammered and why lenders don't talk to them, why you're not supposed to talk to them, that's why. I mean, they're not going to talk to you because you guys sent them to jail 20 years ago, so they're not going to talk to you guys. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So anyway, anyway, mine is much less interesting, but I'll zip through and get us back on time. I will say this, kind of what Michelle said. If you're a buyer or a listing agent, please read the commitment. Like you should. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because there's something invariably that applies to either side if it's not the results that you want, right? Which is basically the seller owns it. This is our purchase price. They have a mortgage that the seller's paying off at closing at the end. You know what I mean? And so we'll go through it. I'm going to get you back on time too. I gave you, this is going to be a PowerPoint that you have in front of you and that the people can see on the camera. And I also gave you just a copy of the title commitment that goes with that PowerPoint. Okay. So when you're looking at it, the first thing you're going to see is a jacket. You know, I mean, some title companies don't send these anymore, but it's really important if you have a sophisticated buyer, especially commercial or rural, you could get a sophisticated buyer that wants to know the underwriter that the title company is using. So if you get a Metroplex lender or a commercial buyer and they've never heard of Red River Title because we're a mom and pop in Grayson County, the first thing they're going to look at is the jacket. Are they underwriting this on a large, reputable underwriter? Because everyone's heard of Fidelity, and everyone's heard of Chicago, and everyone's heard of First American and those type of cues, you know, and it's not unusual for a buyer to even request that we underwrite on certain underwriters. So jackets are important or can be important.
Let me give a plug for you guys.
Okay.
Red River Title doesn't just write for one underwriter. So how many?
5.
There's 5 different underwriters. And why this matters is because sometimes the risk tolerance, I mean, remember, they're title insurance companies. They're very risk adverse. And so there are times where Sean has to go to different underwriters before they can determine which one will insure the title for that specific property.
And we do that. We will flip one. So I've got like 2 that are pretty liberal, like they'll insure anything. You know, like an affidavit airship should, in a state, should be seasoned. In other words, if you die on March 1st and you want to close today, that's not reasonable enough amount of time for, you know, a creditor to make a claim on the estate sometimes. But I've got an underwriter that will insure in that time frame. So there's some caveats, right? But that's where multiple underwriters can help. And we write on 3 of the largest 5. So there's that name equity going back to that jacket too. So anyway, when you're looking at a title commitment, Schedule A is going to be the first thing after the jacket. That's going to be super important. Again, I'm going to talk to you guys from a perspective of a buyer or listing agent, right? So A is for about. You'll see on the title commitment, I'm going to go ahead and, well, first of all, RGF number, you don't really care. Lenders care, you don't really care, right? But you're going to want to look for the next page. It's kind of small, but at the bottom, I'm kind of skipping to the bottom, right? If your contract has sassy seller listed and the vesting on item number 3 says sassy seller, we're good, right? But if you look at that and see sassy seller and wife didn't sign your contract, that's as a listing agent. Or if you're a buyer that's under contract and you see a name or something different or an LLC, or they sold it in LLC, but really it's the individual. Those are things you want to make sure match, right? Buyer or seller side. Are you buying this from the right person? Okay. Going back up towards the top, the effective date and the issue date. So I issued this commitment on March 25th. Okay. That's the day you're probably getting it via email or the day after that or so. But the title plant, our title plant in this instance is March 18th. So again, those extreme circumstances where someone went to file a lien against that contractor seller on March 20th, it may not show up here. But if you're a listing agent, you know the circumstances with your seller, you can queue into the title company. There's ways for us to even close that gap that involves physically going to the courthouse, but we do it. But those are important too. You know, you don't want to get a title commitment on March 25th with an effective date of February 25th. Like, where's the 30 days in between? A and B are your proposed insured buyer. Okay, so a T1, a T1R, you can guess what the R stands for, residential rate. So that's the type of title policy, the owner's title policy being issued to the buyer. Okay, and then C, D, really the rest of them are the type of policy being issued to a proposed borrower. So a loan policy being issued, I say borrower, excuse me, lender, that's the proposed borrower. Should be the same on a standard, you know, real estate transaction, whatever. Any questions so far? Oh, and then at the bottom, it was covered up here. The legal description. So you guys, I don't know if there's a way, how do I get rid of her stuff? It's covered up here. You can kind of see it. You can see the example if you're there. Your legal description, 9.5 times out of 10, you guys are getting your legal description from the appraisal industry, a little short little description, right? And you're putting it on the contract, and 9 times out of 10, that's right. You know what I mean? But you want to make sure it matches here. Okay, I had a deal on Pleasant this afternoon at 4 o'clock. The people owned 3 different tracts that made up, I don't know, 12 or 14 acres. The buyer was buying 3 acres. So your your contract likely, because the survey and plat wasn't done when you did the contract, might have said TBD or might have said 3 acres being out of. So the initial commitment may also match inaccurately, or it may say to be determined or whatever. But ultimately, you want to make sure the property that you're buying or that you're selling, whatever side you're on, matches what is being insured by the title company. And in this case, again, it's kind of hard to see here, but you see it there. The next page, we further describe it. So sometimes a legal description is as nasty as this looks. So whenever probably any topic I do, surveys are going to come up. So surveys are about to come up. So a lot of title companies will literally retype. The reason I don't like to retype a legal description from a survey then is because I'm adding another person's interpretation, kind of like the old school, like how they used to do the Bible. I don't like so I will copy and paste it. And most surveyors on a new survey will send you a Word document legal description, which is really easy to copy and paste. But if they don't, or if we're not using a new survey, every time that deed has been scanned, that legal is a little bit worse. And I have been doing this now for 20 years, and I still don't know why everyone hates getting a new survey if they don't have to. But I can't stress how important they really are, And no offense to the two gentlemen that came and helped, those surveys can be reused over and over again and don't necessarily have an expiration date. Sometimes they do, but most of the time they don't, right? So that's a good $600 to spend, even if there's an existing one. If the existing one just isn't great, that's really the best way I can say it. It's old. Some are still handwritten with rulers. Some are just crappy. Not. I'm talking about examples beyond just they've added a pool. You know what I mean? Surveyors don't have to defend a survey they didn't issue to your buyer either. So you are adding pressure to the title company to use this survey and assume that it's good, right? I'm relying on a seller to sign a T-47 that it's accurate, and a seller to give me that sworn statement that it's accurate, right? But you're putting a lot of pressure on your buyer too to accept a survey that's 15 years old and been 3 buyers ago. And Kate Helvey's sitting in her office in Denison, and you're going to go to her and say, "You got this boundary line wrong." She's going to say, "I don't care." Not because she doesn't care, but because she didn't do that for that buyer.
And you're putting pressure on your lender because you're going, "Hey, lender, we want you to be okay with insuring this property." And yet we don't have, like, if Sean is not okay with that survey because there's been some changes and he deletes survey coverage, we no longer have protection as a lender for any discrepancies. And so you're asking us to take that risk and with no protection. So
and the bottom line is surveyors are also not infallible. Again, using Sean's Pebblebrook, most of the houses in Pebblebrook are platted, mature subdivisions are pretty standard, the surveys. And I am pretty liberal on trying to work with using an existing one on that. If you've got a rural and you don't have a survey in your seller's name that's good and clear and easy to read, you're not doing yourself or the buyer any favors by just really pushing to reuse that one. It's really, this is your legal description. So this is what your buyer's buying. So you can zoom in, you can read it, you know what I mean? But what was once a distance of 400.97 feet, right? This is the second call. So by the way, this property would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different shared boundary lines, okay? Because I have 7 different calls, right? We start here, turn back to the beginning, okay? That's right. But if he traveled 47 feet and he went to, he went to the center of the road, well, what if the road's repaved? Seriously, like this happens. Like the center of the road in 2002 may be the other side of the road in 2024. Okay? So, I don't want to harp on surveys, but it's the most mind-boggling thing. Well, look, why can't you reuse this survey? It's 45 years old and hand-drawn. Yeah, but it looks great to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm the jerk that you got to spend money for. Anyway, yeah.
This is kind of self-serving. So y'all know where it's prejudice. We have the paper right here. I don't look at that. I'm going to need more parking. I'm going to have to look. Thankfully, the road up there.
Oh, good.
I can get that spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can get the corner parking spot.
I'll I'll rephrase this.
Nobody can find.
The Railroad Commission.
DMSF, let us know that who
I have, I'm sorry.
So Sean's question is a good question just in general. So he's asking about a structure, a building structure that he manages in his role as chief appraiser, and they need additional parking. And so there's an abandoned railroad that he is working on utilizing part of that abandoned railroad, getting the permission and extending the parking. So whenever you're going to do an appraisal in that area, and this could relate to an abandoned pipeline easement, or just any of the easements or right of ways that used to exist that no longer exist, and now how does that answer his question, and then how that would apply to a transaction?
That's a good one, because it's you're specific, the railroad, right? So the Railroad Commission is over all the railroad lines, right? They're also over oil and gas. So it is probably one of the most powerful, biggest bureaucratic state government organizations we have. Okay. So my answer specifically to where you're set is it's top of mind with the city, because they just did Washington, or they just did Crockett and Travis. So I would get Robbie or someone there to say, who are you talking to at the railroad that abandoned the dedicated part over the road? Like, get them while you can, okay? They will just abandon it. It's a process. You got to go through and you got to do it. And they're not going to get a survey. They're just going to say, the 200 feet by 30 feet wide belongs to property owner adjacent, which would be the county. But Railroad Commission is the hardest. It takes the longest, but it's top of mind. They just did the highway. Now they just did those two intersections. Someone at the city manager's office has a point of contact with the Railroad Commission.
Contact with, we have an offer.
Oh, good.
$50,000.
Could you talk to one of these guys to see if it's worth the value and all that stuff?
Yeah.
How much is an abandoned railroad really worth?
For that?
No, but so they have their own process. Like, they're going to run the show, right? And once they agree, and then they will survey that off, and they will give you a legal description, and then they will convey. Everyone, I'll say at one time, quit claim deeds suck. If your client tells you they did one or their family did one, tell them immediately or prepare them immediately. We're not relying. No one relies on a quit claim deed, because a quit claim deed literally says, I don't know if I own it, but if I do own it, you can have it. But there's a big but, because we're answering Sean's question. Quit claim deeds are acceptable from municipalities and government entities, because they're also quick to say, I don't know if we own it, but we've been using it for 250 years. You can have it now. You know what I mean? So they'll quit claim deed that over to you, likely that way. Does that make sense? So, any other questions on that? So Schedule B. B is for beware. Okay, you've all heard it. Exceptions, exclusions, and this also kind of goes along with the survey, and I'll get to it in just a second. But as you're a buyer's agent or a listing agent, and you're reading through the commitment, what is the title company telling you they will not cover? And before I even get to the next 2 or 3 screens, title companies do not cover oil and gas rights, but we'll get to it. Mineral rights, mineral reservations, royalties, all that stuff.
So I have such a hard time with this.
Oil and gas, or just Schedule B in general?
Schedule B, because the whole thing is exceptions from coverage. And I'm like, okay, well, you just mixed everything, like there is no coverage.
I'll push back and say, well, not everything. So let's go through it, and then we'll come back to it.
So the question, so what was stated was the feeling that Schedule B includes everything. So then the question is, what are?
Yeah.
It includes all things excluded. So what are you actually covering? Yeah.
So okay. For instance, the very first one, okay, restrictions, which include whether you're an HOA or not, right? Title companies don't. So to say we don't cover restrictions is to say we don't enforce restrictions either. So if you are presenting a property that a piece of land that your buyer wants to get a mobile home on. I'm just using the one example that, yeah. And it's a land deal, but they want to put a mobile home on. And now you see restrictions, and you've read through those restrictions, and it says, plan to say, no mobile homes. And you call me, and I say, sorry, I don't know, what do you want me to do about it? Because that's the reality, right? I will help you, and I will read them with you, And I will say, that's what they say. Yep, you're right. Because I can't, but I'll still close it. It's just your buyer's taking that risk. That's right. And and I've provided to you these restrictions that say you can't have a mobile home. You can't have pigs. Sorry. I mean, so if you put a pig on there and you call me and say, how come you didn't tell me? I said, no, I did. I said it I can't make you read it, but I sent it to you. Because we don't enforce. So that's an example of why that's an exclusion from coverage, because we don't have any authority on anybody, right? So we certainly don't have authority on restrictions or what is filed of record. We can get into the weeds on restrictions because sometimes they're filed in 1960 and they have no expiration and they're enforced by the guy that died in 1961. You know what I mean? Like, what do you do about that? And there's ways.
Right.
There's ways. And how come it says no mobile home, but next door and on down the road that was in the same chain of title 20 years ago has mobile homes? So that's where I don't know. Okay, okay. I'm always nice. I'm always going to talk to you, but okay. That's all I can really say about that.
These are like a health policy. It's pre-existing, if you will. We're
Could be.
telling you up front, if you have these issues, don't come to us and expect us to defend or spend resources or go to court and try and resolve these issues with you. We told you up front, these are things that we're not involved with.
Yeah.
And an insurance policy.
Listen, and at the end of the day, the very, very short story that my underwriters would hate for me to say this to you. I should have said this from the beginning. Okay. A title company has two very important roles in the transaction. One is escrow and one is insurance. My goal is to give a title policy to the buyer in his name for the value of the property that he paid, sales price, right? And to issue a loan policy to the lender at a liability of her loan amount. Does that make sense? That's where I'm trying to get to you. So I want to make sure I can issue that title policy to your buyers without exception of ownership, like the right seller is conveying this to you, and with a claim of someone else's lien taking priority over a lender's lien or anybody's. You know what I mean? Which we'll get to that too, right? And so, yeah, there's just exclusions. Like there's things I want to make sure you own it, but I can't tell you that you're going to own what's below it because that can be conveyed separately. I mean, and the title commitment makes an attempt to tell you that it was conveyed separately. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't own it either. It just means that at one time someone else owned below there too, and there's another role. Or that means you could put a mobile home on it. I just ensured that you bought the dirt and you own the dirt. So what you do with it after closing is your business. So if you violate a restriction, I'm not here to tell you you can or can't. Right. So the very first one is restrictions. Now, one other thing on restrictions and HOA bylaws are not always the same. Now, the restrictions filed of record should be, if you're now, we're restrictions and HOA, right? So the restrictions filed of record should still be the same property, building requirements, things you can do within that subdivision that may come separately from the HOA in the form of bylaws, right? But the bylaws will include the administrative stuff of the association. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the difference between those things. So sometimes, for instance, Highland, not Highland's a bad example, like Stone Hollow when they were doing Austin Landing, they just had restrictions of record. And the law change was last year before on disclosures of what HOAs are supposed to provide to buyers ahead of closing. Not all of them do have a good job of that, but that's the intent, I guess. But anyway, so I'm going to send you the filed restrictions. The contract HOA addendum says not title company, seller must provide X amount of info to a buyer, which includes above the restrictions, bylaws, budgets, the HOA's liability insurance, those things. And I can't make that management company send me all those things to forward it to your buyer. So when you guys call me and say the HOA is supposed to provide this, okay, well, I requested it and no one wanted to pay for it. They wanted $700 up front. No one wanted to pay for it. I still requested it and you're still not happy. Like you're getting what we can do.
But we as lenders are going to be looking for and paying attention to that. So that request it up front. Make sure that seller is getting that put together. Does that affect you guys?
When you're at a listing appointment, and some of these subdivisions, are in an HOA before you step foot in your listing appointment, right? ask them to reach out to their management company to go ahead and get that information, because there is a cost. You're going to pay it then, or you're going to pay it at closing, one or the other, right? And I understand some sellers say, let's pass it on to a buyer, so they don't want to do it now, but you're doing yourself a favor by having that stuff provided to a buyer up front. Resale certificates typically have an expiration date. So now I'm going to speak out the other side of my mouth. It's hard to request that stuff up front, pay $400, and then it expires in 30 days. You got to request it again. The title company doesn't want to use it, so I get it. But find out if they got the packet from when they bought it, right? The only thing that likely changed from the day they bought it to the day they sold it are dues, which we're always going to ask a resale certificate. So dues, and they're going to know. Like, they voted on something to change, right? So ask them, did you get your packet when you bought it? Where is it? Let me have it now. Let's put it in the listing. Let's just have it available. Rural restrictions are a little bit harder. It's different than HOA, obviously. They're a little bit harder just to get. Any more? I kind of beat that dead horse.
No, but I mean, and I'm going to beat this dead horse. Transparency and communication. Ask the questions up front, because remember, if there's any cost associated with this transaction that affects the buyer, guess what we got to do? We got to verify that they have the funds to pay those costs. So if we don't know the cost till the last minute, we don't know if we've got verifiable funds. And funds right now is a hot topic. So.
And I'm still on Schedule B, but any more questions on restrictions? So schedule, that's the first one. I'm going. Am I frozen?
Not fancy enough to have touchscreen.
I was touching that.
We've already covered all that, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, it's fine. There's a lot of promulgated stuff that she's skipping through now. We don't have any tidewaters here, you know what I mean, like at the coast and stuff like that. Oh, you went one too far. All right, real quick. So the last item you'll see in Schedule B, a couple things that are very important. Again, we're still on exclusions. Right off the top, we don't cover oil and gas rights, royalty interests, reservations that have been conveyed separate of the title. So when you're negotiating a contract, a rural contract, and you do an HOA addendum, that seller is only saying they are or are not reserving what they may own. It doesn't mean they own them and are keeping them. They're just saying, if I own them, I'm keeping them, or if I own them, well, if you don't do an HOA addendum, they automatically convey if a seller has them, mineral rights. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that HOA addendum, I see it, excuse me, the mineral addendum.
That's what I was like.
Did I say it twice? Sorry. Mineral addendum. I get mineral addendums attached to contracts where the seller says, I don't want them. I'm not reserving it. You don't really need it. It's not necessary. But if you have a mineral addendum in your contract, that's not even a statement that the seller owns it. Now, a listing agent that visits with their client that knows the property can speak definitively about it. Great. That's awesome. Then they know. They know more than I know. They know. So that's great. And they can then, negotiate with the buyer what they're keeping, what they're not keeping, or what they're getting, even if they're just trying to dump everything. You know what I mean? And believe me, as these tracts of land get bigger, and we get more commercial developers, this is a topic. Like, this is a thing. I literally had one in Whitesboro that went from I think it was like a $22,000 per acre price to a $30,000 acre price. That $8,000 being completely dedicated to what they determined to be the value of the minerals, because there was active production of payment. So they amended the contract for that very thing, because then the buyer said, you know what, I don't want to leave you access to go get future minerals extracted. That makes sense. But at the end of the day, for a title company, I don't do it. No. But I have a landman, right? If you ever need a referral, he's great. He lives in Pottsboro, and I personally hired him when my dad died. He does all of Texas, and he was wonderful. And it's the most detailed. He literally could tell me the last check cut and to who it was cut to, or actually all the checks, because there was like 8 people. And he was like, these 8 people received $4.12 on April 5th. You know what I mean? Like, he gave me that much detail. So they're really good. The other thing you'll see here are easements. So in this example, there's an easement to electric co-op. So you're looking at a survey, new, existing, whatever it is, and you're looking at title commitment. Well, we do talk to surveyors and ask them to review our commitment and vice versa. And we will, so an initial commitment may have 6 more items on here, and then the survey is done after the fact, and we've removed them. So, like, for instance, an easement to the Grayson Call Electric Co-op, GCEC, right? You're looking at the survey, you see it, you've identified it. Well, we're not covering, we're disclosing, how about I say it that way? We're disclosing there's an easement. And the easement rights owner has a right to maintain whatever it is they have been granted access to. So I'm not covering, I am not ensuring that you own this where you can cut them off. That's why I'm giving you this disclosure here. Does that make sense? But also, again, as a buyer's agent, you're looking through these things. Okay, you're comfortable with that. So we have GCEC. Now we have TPNL. So, okay, why do we have two electric things? We have two power lines. That's the answer. Now you know the answer. It's because TPNL, which is whatever it is now, TXU, put a power pole on the back 40, right? And the co-op put a new power pole on the front 40. That's why you have two different easements to two different electrical providers, as an example. Luella Water Supply, right? That's their water meter, okay? Again, take an exception, but you're looking at it, or you know there's a water meter, and Luella is the water provider. So what I'm telling you here is when you're looking at this and you're checking off, like, okay, well, this makes sense. So this 11 items that looks incredibly scary, you have now said, okay, well, we know the seller has the mineral rights, or his grandpa from 50 years ago has the mineral rights, whatever. Okay, we've done that. So now you've marked off 3 things that you no longer are worried about, okay? You know there's a GCEC and Luella as utility providers. Well, there's more things you're not worried about. You want them to maintain their power lines and water meters, so you want them to have that access. Does that make sense? All right, so let's get to the booger, going back to surveys. Okay, I've looked at the survey. These things still apply. We're using a survey from 2018. It's 2024. It's 6 years old, and the T47 has said they've added a barn. Okay, let's talk about a few things. First, as a listing agent, if you put it on the T47, we're going to exclude it from coverage. So what I mean by that is there is some discretion, if I'm a listing agent, that I would allow for. Did they go to Home Depot and buy a $1,500 little temporary building that they had their 4 sons come and put on the back of the property, and you're listing this at $200,000 with or without that shed? Okay, you can put it on there, and we're going to take an exclusion. And lenders sometimes don't like that. But if the rule of thumb to me is it really adding value? And the T47 says improvements. If it's not adding value, isn't an improvement. Does that make sense? I'm not telling you not to do it. Okay, I want to be clear because I am in the title insurance business and I want to assess that risk myself. But I am saying use a little discretion on. It says improvements. Well, I consider improvements something of value. Are these guys going to use it in their appraisal? Excuse me. Are you using it when you're listing the property? Okay, but if the penalty 47 is going on the commitment, and then a lender's going to look at it and determine if they like it or not. Same thing with the fence. My underwriter in the room would kill me if they had a fence and they took it down and put up a new fence in the same spot. Well, if that's worth putting up either. Kind of think of it as a surveyor even going to show that? No. So you know what I mean? Like it's the same fence. It's a fence, and that fence is in the same location. So
And what we care about as a lender is a structure built over the top of an easement, where something of value that we're lending on, there's contributory value given to that thing that could possibly be sitting on an easement. And could that thing be destroyed because someone needed to maintain an easement?
So that is
then
the
we
caveat.
care.
That tough shed, and it's up against the back fence, and you have an idea that there's a utility easement back there, I would go ahead and disclose it. Because you want to make sure that buyer knows that he's taking the risk that tough shed, even though it's worth $1,000, if that is built in the utility easement. Absolutely do that. I'm thinking of more of the things that don't really matter. I guess the best way to say it. I hate to say that, and I shouldn't say it, but I am. But I'll give you one example. So off of 69, a T47. This was like a 6-acre tract, and there is the 75-foot wide easement for the big power lines, right? The go to and from the grid. Okay, so this property, the house sits right here, beautiful house, whatever. Driveway goes here, and then to the right on the T47, they had a beautiful existing survey that I would have accepted under normal circumstances, but they added a carport. And the T47, this is absolutely 100% true. The T47 said carport added at the, let's just call it northeast end of the driveway. Okay, if you're looking at that existing survey, you'll see at the northeast end of the driveway was where that 75-foot easement crossed over by about half. You know what I mean? It encroached about 20 or 30 feet into that 75-foot. Okay, So they have a survey and T47 that the seller provided them. I think there was one other change that's not, for this example, but anyway, so they get a new survey. So they've been made aware a carport has been added at the northeast end of the driveway. They get a new survey. That survey shows the carport, and it shows the dotted line of the easement right over the middle of that carport. That survey was done on Monday, closing's Friday. That survey and the updated commitment with this exception that, hey, your carport's in the easement was provided to the buyer on Monday, okay? Closing on Friday. At closing, we showed the survey to the buyer. They signed it because we have people sign surveys, okay? Last year, this closed 4 or 5 years ago. Last year, that buyer's agent, the listing agent was local. And I'm not saying this to pick on out-of-town agents or whatever, but it wasn't a Metroplex agent. It was like a far east Texas, like east of Tyler. And that's maybe where the buyers were coming from, agent. Calls me and says they've been contacted by GCC Encore, someone, that if they don't move their carport, that the cost to them is going to be $20,000 for Encore to destroy it and remove it. And he said they're really ticked off and they want to know why it wasn't told to them. I was, oh my God, that's terrible. Let me look this up and I'll call you back. Called him back and I said, T47 disclosed it. Survey was done and a title commitment was issued with that exception. Not a lot I can do. Yeah. And the buyer signed it. I S you not, this was the buyer's agent's response to me, okay? They were not sophisticated enough to understand that. So he said, he said that to me and he said, I think they want to make a claim. And by the way, when a claim is made, it comes to me, but it's immediately turned over to the underwriter. So going back to that jacket, right? That's who actually reviews an actual title claim. Even if my underwriter kicks it back to me and says, you screwed this up, you're paying it, not us, whatever. Okay. So I said, okay, here's the process, but I want you to know they're not going to pay this claim. Your buyer was given more substantial evidence ahead of closing of this item. And he said, well, we're going to make a claim. He was still nice that one. And he said that we're still going to make a claim. It was the fastest decline of the claim. I mean, when you make a claim, they spend 40 man hours of 5 different people just reading your email or your claim letter over and over again, right? They declined it the next day, because it was the biggest no-brainer ever. Okay, so that buyer, this is the only time it's ever happened, made a TDI complaint. So it's kind of like a complaint to like that I didn't do my job. So TDI, that's the first one I ever did. I was like, oh, wow, cool. And so I responded to them and I put in there, and I responded back to them and I gave them all the details and facts. And then I put in the end, by the way, when I explained this to the buyer's agent, on such and such a date, his response was the buyer was not sophisticated enough to understand that because that TDI complaint was going right back to the buyer. Like it was made by the buyer, not their agent. So I just wanted, I was being a little catty, kind of an asshole, I get it, like I was. But at the same time, what else can I do? Because at that second point, they had become jerks. Like they want to sue me, and I didn't do. Like, what do you want me to do about this? And they had called Chris Noah, who had done the survey. Like, oh, why are you calling me? Like it's right there, plain as day. Like I can't make you read it, right? So anyway, that's where this shows up. All of that lovely story to say, that's where that shows. And by the way, TDI said they didn't care. So that's what happened. Sometimes they like that tough shit. Okay, let's go back to that example because you don't want Michelle calling and saying, Red Title was dug in on a tough shed that's in a building setback line, across the building setback line.
Drag it 20 feet and fix that.
Okay, but sometimes there's options. Again, we go back to that no value. So right here, owner policy only. Okay, I'm going to give her a clean lender's policy. All that means to her and your proposed buyer is that if the city comes to them and says, move the shed, right? She is not going to be affected. She's not going to be affected because that's not going to impact her lien, right? But I am still taking exception or not covering the buyer's, use or whatever you want to call it, the risk, I guess, of having that tough shed across the building setback line.
Showing in defense of the seller's listing side, T47 clearly states that this is to the best of our knowledge and the title company is relying on our information for your purpose.
Yeah.
So.
And by the way, that survives closing. There's been a not with us, but there's been a deal. So you represented the seller in 2018, and your seller purposely did not disclose on T47 and approve it May. So the title company didn't know. Well, now they've sold it in 2017, and that buyer sold it in 2021. And they put on there none, because from the time they owned it to the time they sold it, there had been no changes, even though there was a change that wasn't disclosed the first time around. Guess what? If there is a title claim, we could theoretically go after that prior 2017 owner because they lied on a sworn affidavit. Does that make sense? So
I'm just saying,
surveys are important.
We encourage them to say,
Yes.
replace the fence. You know, we see a lot of decks. You know, you try and guesstimate, hey, they put in a shed 20 feet behind the back porch or something. Because we do want them to be truthful and honest.
That's
with
right.
you guys. If you say no biggie, nowhere close to the boundaries, nowhere close to the side setbacks or the rear front setback, you usually don't have a problem.
That's right.
But
and if you've got something close, be specific. Yeah, be specific. We added a tough shed, right? We added it 4 feet behind the house because I can see the house to that building setback line is 20 feet away. Does that make sense?
Disclose it because again, we've got to mitigate risk too. So, you know, we want enough information, but sometimes we don't want too much information. And then it's all in the narrative. Like if you guys are putting that information on the T47 and I can go back to our attorneys and go, hey, what do you think our risk is? Are we okay with this risk? They could say yes. And we had that scenario just recently. So again, transparency and communication is key.
Is Pete Bowling an underwriter now?
Huh?
Is Pete Bowling an underwriter now?
No.
Okay. Well, she helped us in that deal, and I was like, oh, she.
No, I just went straight to her.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes
You
I
don't want
like.
to tell the underwriter.
Sometimes they're the expert in the matter.
Yeah, in that case, it's a closer. Yeah.
This is
It makes her job easier if I get that done.
related to what you're talking about, but it's important too to look at the surveys if you have a chance to see those ahead of time or as quickly as they're performed, because you're talking about you'll update the policy to the new survey and either take away or add to, but those of us that have been doing it a while have seen plenty of surveys and it will say their disclaimer on the survey. This survey was performed without the benefit of a title commitment.
Yes.
So they don't know what you guys have found in your research.
Yes.
So look at your survey too.
And let's back up to paragraph 6A8. Couple of little caveats. I'll be
in
quick.
the contract.
In the contract, paragraph 6A8. Okay.
Thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, let me go back to it because you can see it here with your
Hey,
eyes.
and from a CE standpoint, if you were here for CE and you need to leave, you've satisfied. If you want to stay for information, we'll keep.
But you'll miss the drawing for a free
Here,
survey info.
you want to pass that real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah.
Okay, real quick. I skipped over it. So paragraph 6A8, the title policy will or will not be amended. Okay. So the standard exception, if you see it, forget the bold part for a second. Any discrepancies, see if it sounds familiar. Any discrepancies, conflicts, or shortages in area, or boundary lines, or in any encroachments, protrusions, overlapping of improvements. Okay. Doesn't that read almost verbatim to paragraph 6A8? Will or will not be amended. So the strike through on the final time. So if you have checked, it will be amended. The survey's great. Everyone's like, why is this not struck in through? Well, this is a commitment. This is a commitment to ensure it's not the final title policy that will have the strike through of everything except shortages in area. So shortages, so everyone calls it the shortages in area paragraph. But technically, shortages in area is the exception that remains. So in other words, if Chris Noah called this 40,214 square feet, shortages in area says if it's 40,218 square feet total land size, that's not for us to determine, and we're not insured. We're ensuring that you bought this 12 acres, whatever. Does that make sense? But all the other items are going to be crossed through. Have to have a valid, accurate survey. So if we're using an existing, I need a good T47, I need a good, clear copy of the survey. Cannot give that coverage that you're requesting in the contract without a good survey. Even if it's cash deal, even if it's a lot. And a plat doesn't count because a plat is not required to show all the easements and or improvements if there are any. A plat is only required to show the boundary lines and the setback line and easement lines determined by that platting process. What I mean by that is if I have 4 acres and I subdivide it into 4 1-acre tracts and the county tells me or the city tells me these are the utility easement lines and building setback lines I am requiring of you to subdivide this. That's all well and good. That shows up on a plat. But what a plat doesn't show is there was a house on the far end lot and there's a gas line right through the middle that was existing. They don't have to show that on a plat. They're subdividing an existing tract, but a survey, they do. So that's why a plat doesn't work for the coverages in 6A8. Does that make sense? Any other questions on that?
Tell them about those premiums. We're running the same.
Gosh, Norman. Okay, any more questions, Schedule B? He hasn't said I have a 50-year-old kid yet, so I'm ahead of you. C,
like this info.
that's probably true. All right, C, Schedule C is for cure. What's outstanding on a commitment? Again, if you're a buyer's agent, look at it. So you think as a listing agent that Schedule C is important to you. Did your client tell you what's outstanding and must be addressed at or before closing, right? But as a buyer, you also want to know. Okay, so in this example, do you trust executed by sassy seller? That's our seller. Great, they have a mortgage. Who cares? That's going to get paid off at closing. Title company's going to do it. So you're not super concerned either side, listing or selling agent. You're not super concerned about a mortgage.
Real quick, and I know we're over time, but you guys, this is where also, like, if the seller has a HUD loan and they filed for deferment, and there was their mortgage balance, when we get the payoff, that's where this is going to show up. So you guys pay attention, because a lot of times they forgot that they deferred and didn't make payments for 18 months when they gave you all of the information so that you could figure your net sheet. And then all of a sudden you get this and it shows up.
You're talking about the COVID?
Yes. That's a second lien. That's filed.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, I talked to a seller probably back in October, November that signed it in September. And by October, thought it didn't, I forgot. I don't know where I signed that. I was like, well, you signed it. Like there's a notary that came to you. I can see it. You signed it, 37 days ago. You know what I mean? Like, how do you not know? Most of those deferrals are being serviced by the first lien holder anyway. So it's not the end of the world. We can usually still track it down, but not always. If HUD guaranteed it or something like that, you have to call this special office in Oklahoma City to get that payoff. And that happens. Okay.
But it's just less money in their pocket, and that's what
they just need to be aware. But yeah, but if you're listing it at that minimum and they didn't tell you that $7,000 that is going to be there, that could kick a bill. It has. Okay. The other thing, as Michelle said, so we know that the seller has a lien. Now, look here. We have a child support lien against fabulous buyer. That's the buyer. Buyer didn't tell you about a child support lien that they had at their first wife.
Show up on the credit reports.
And it didn't show up on the credit report. And so now, I guarantee you, the lender is looking at this on behalf of a buyer. Because now, guess who could take priority over a lender's lien? The government. And the child support lien is filed by the government. City, well, really, county, state, and federal government can all take priority over a lender's lien. So this child support lien, well, I'm paying $400 a month for that old battle axe I was married to. Okay, that's great, but they have a lien, and you may be current on paying it back, but the Texas Attorney General doesn't release it based on the payment schedule. They release it by paid in full. So a lender like Michelle is going to say, get a payoff. We're collecting this. And now your buyer's going to have to come up with another $15,000 for the balance due, because it's different than a judgment. And I can talk to you about that if you want, because a judgment doesn't take priority, but a child support lien, Texas Attorney General's lien could. So sometimes a buyer is not always forthcoming because they don't think they have to be, because they're paying their child support liens. They just didn't tell you they were in default for the 10 years prior to that. So does that make sense? Now, there's also, sometimes you'll see this. So as a buyer, or a listing agent may see this and say, hey, is your buyer still going to be able to buy this? Like, are they going to clear it? Also, sometimes, Norman Gordon has a child support lien, but there's two Norman Gordons. And there's ways that we get around that, but you're going to see it on there, have initial panic, and then clear it. Yeah. The one with the 50-year-old juvie kid is, there's, so don't panic is, I guess, the moral of that story. But call me.
Have a conversation
with your client. Hey, is this you? You have child support? Yeah.
Just remember though, these
I I had one.
Problems that must be solved before y'all.
I had one 2 years ago that was kind of hard to clear. I'll tell you why. Okay. Norman Gordon had a child support lien. Okay. My buyer was Norman Gordon. Norman Gordon's address was the property was the address on the driver's license. Like it is the same guy. You can't say it's not you. It's dad, and it wasn't filed with senior. So literally, Junior was buying a house and had to go through a small little hurdle, not a big one, to say. And he was the beneficiary of the child support lien that was filed, and so he had to go through a little hurdle to say, no, that's not me. That's my dad. But if you can collect it, that'd be great. Because I get some money. But it happened, like you know what I mean. Like so, it happens anyway.
You should have seen that second time.
All right, last item D is for disclose. I have to tell you who the officers of my underwriter are, and also the officers of Red River Title. And the guy that did this presentation, the idiot that did it, didn't mean to leave this off. But this is the initial title policy amount. It's not supposed to say zero. In other words, it's supposed to have the title policy amount based on the figures from Schedule A, the sales price and the loan amount. And it's based on that loan amount. So sometimes, just real quick, you put on third-party financing that you're buying a $200,000 house with $180,000 in as a loan amount, but Michelle's going to actually send you $184,000 because the FHA premium or whatever. You know what I mean? So this isn't super accurate on the initial commitment, but the final version is.
It will. Yep. All got to match.
Any questions? I know I tried to zip through that. Way less interesting than these.
Do y'all feel smarter now? Yeah, Brenda.
You raised your hand.
I just want to say I really love your app.
Good, thank you.
Oh,
Red River Agent, one word in the App Store. It is a seller and buyer net sheet. I'll give you 30 seconds. But it will calculate mortgage insurance. So if you're accurate, it's going to be pretty accurate. The lender fees, there's a tab that says edit. So if she's already given you a loan estimate or something, you can edit it. It's fine. We guessed high. I guess like a 2% origination, right? No one really charges that anymore unless it's a buy down. Anyway.
No, but most everybody pays 2 points to buy their rate down.
Okay, so good.
Leave it there.
But you can even edit it if you really want to get super specific. I think that app is wonderful when you're face to face on the spot in a house. You may have programs that work, or you may have your own system that works when you're at home doing your research ahead of time. But when that seller's telling you, if I accept this offer, how much am I going to get? It works on the spot. On the seller side, I will say, enter the payoff they tell you plus $2,000.
Yep.
And then take out, on the seller net sheet, take out the interest rate because the app tries to do per diem for you. So just take the interest rate out, add $2,000 or $3,000 to the payoff they tell you to account for that interest. And when they say, why are you doing that? Interest in arrears, escrow shortages, and payoff fees. Like that's just the.
And escrow shortages are pretty common right now.
Very common. Appraisals have gone up, and so escrow shortages.
Insurance.
I gotta fix it. So a real last thing, if you don't look at it, because this got the dumbest mustache face, and the reason why I was at Corey Hill's office, and when I pulled up to put the Red River Title logo right next to it was like a dumb picture I sent to my kid, and I had it's.
Someone email him right now to fix that picture.
You can just put a logo.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna do. And that picture was there, and I saw that too.
Thank you.
Questions? Oh, thank you. It was good to see you.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate, and next week, get registered for next week. We'll continue the conversation contracts, and Bart will have more information. He is a compliance nerd. We're all nerds in our own way, right? He's a real. Yes. Yeah. And so he's going to have his own point of view on what's going on and how it affects you guys in the industry, some things to look for, and all of that good stuff. So don't miss that class. And then I'll see you back in 2 weeks. So, all right. Have a great day.
So,
yeah, no, yeah.